It's no secret that I live out loud. Photojournalism is one of my greatest passions. I've always tried to use social media to share my life through photos and videos as an art form to tell my story. I try to inspire others to do their best, to be their best, always do the right thing, to try to help others, to fight for someone they don't know, to use their privileges in ways that they can help and advocate for others, and to always push themselves to live their best lives and go out there and see the world. There's a big part of my story the last few years that very few knew, and today I'm finally deciding to share. God help me. I've been an open book in my life except for this topic: infertility, miscarriages, and baby loss. Not because I'm embarrassed. As you know, I'm quite open about my termination for medical reasons at 17 weeks back in 2014, but because I really didn't want to hear people's opinions on me getting pregnant at my age and having another baby when I already had 4 kids. When I turned 40 in 2019, I decided I want to go for a 5th baby. My girls were natural pregnancies and my boys were from IVF. I had 3 embryos left from Skylar, his twins, frozen in time. Isn't that wild? So that fall of 2019, I did an embryo transfer and it didn't work. Then during Christmas of 2019, I did another transfer, and what do you know? I was pregnant, and I was ecstatic. Fast forward to January of 2020. I was 8 weeks pregnant, and things were moving along. Here's where the story takes a very surprising and devastating twist. Unfortunately, the bad news didn't end there. January 21st, 2020, I had my 8-week sonogram that morning, and everything was looking okay. That night, I was attending Congressman Tom Suozzi's town hall at Dix Hills Jewish Center. Over the weekend, I carefully prepared my questions to ask him. I had done my research and I wanted answers. About 5 or 6 men went before me asking long-winded questions. They went on and on and on. Finally, it was my turn. I went up to the mic and I started to give brief background information. Suozzi had gloated a few days prior that he had received an A rating from Citizens United Action Fund, and then I proceeded to point out the hypocrisy of him taking over $1 million from corporate and super PACs in the last 2 election cycles. Here's where it went awry. Honestly, as I write this and as I tell the story, it just makes me sick to my stomach, and it was devastating to relive what happened to me. So about 1 minute into my question, a big white man stood up and suddenly walked over and lunged at me, grabbing the microphone and attempting to rip it from my hand. I held firm to the microphone, pulling it back, and told the man to stop and to let me speak. He was shouting in my face and would not let go. The man, apparently known as Mel, shouted aggressively with vitriol. He yelled, "Ask your question!" Standing within 2 inches of my face, I could feel his breath on me. At that moment, my husband stood up and stepped in front of me to prevent any further violence. He knew I was pregnant, and of course, nobody else did. A kerfuffle ensued with other men getting involved, and the whole experience was surreal. As terrified as I was, I knew I had to finish what I came to do. So I stepped back with the microphone and continued to read my question. I didn't want to admit fear and let this white man win. I had every right as a constituent to ask a legitimate question of my representative. I had every right to ask if he was representing my voice and the voice of his constituents, rather than his corporate donors and PAC money that he had received over $1 million of from the last 2 cycles from 2016 and 2018. Every other man that asked a question was allowed to start and finish for a minimum of 5 minutes, ranging to upwards of 10 or 15 minutes, without being interrupted and silenced. I was attacked at the 1 minute and 20-second mark as soon as I started speaking. Was it a racial attack? I don't know. Was it a misogynistic attack? I guess I'll let the readers and the viewers decide when you watch the video. This should not have been a controversial question to ask. As a Democrat in a room full of Democrats, the topic of campaign finance reform and rejecting corporate money was front and center in the 2020 elections. His Democratic primary challenger at the time, and now still, Melanie Dorigo, like many other primary challengers across America, reject corporate money, because she believes she should ethically represent and directly answer to the people that elected her and not corporate donors, period. This is common sense. Shaking, I headed back to my seat. As I was returning to my seat, several of the men in the audience started shouting and heckling me, even women too, such as, "Write him a letter," and others in efforts to silence me. Suozzi doubled down when I asked if he was hypocritical for announcing his A rating from the End Citizens United PAC when the premise of that grade and the organization is based on rejecting corporate money. Suozzi pinched his fingers together and narrowed his eyes proudly and proclaimed to the crowd, "Not even that little bit." The main message that was lost on the crowd was that Suozzi is receiving donations from the same corporations he regulates, though he has a seat on the House Ways and Means Committee. This should have outraged anyone. As soon as I sat down, I had intense pains in my stomach. I was terrified, and I was shaking with fear and anger, trying to figure out what just happened. My head was spinning. Congressman Suozzi, who had known me, who I had volunteered for from 2016 to 2019, did absolutely nothing to stop this sexist and scary attack. Instead, he stood there smirking during the incident and even joked afterwards, resulting in collective laughter from those in the room at my expense. As I sat there, doubled down in pain and fear, at no time did anyone check to see if I was okay. No effort was made to remove the man who attacked me, and no apologies were made to me from Suozzi, his staff, nor anyone from the temple. Instead, I had to sit there for the remainder of the event, which was more than an hour, with this deranged man only a row or two in front of me. My husband usually didn't attend the town halls, but thank God he was there with me that night to escort me out. But the whole time I sat there stressing over what would happen upon our exit and in the parking lot. It was really, really traumatic. And I'll never forget that feeling of sitting there just with a mix of emotions, just embarrassed and confused on what happened. I was ashamed, and I didn't understand. Like, this was a room full of Democrats, yet they treated me like I was some disgusting enemy. It was perplexing to me what exactly the congressman and his supporters considered funny about a man attacking a woman at a United States congressional town hall. I mean, it's all there on the video for everyone to watch. That a U.S. congressman would normalize this episode clearly demonstrates the pervasiveness and continued acceptance of men silencing women and women of color in our society. It was unacceptable and truly deplorable. It appalled me and outraged me. I just couldn't believe that it happened to me. In good faith, I cannot tell other women or men that they can safely ask challenging questions of Congressman Suozzi at his town halls. Congressman Suozzi's inaction signaled to the room that this aggressive, hostile, and threatening behavior is tolerated at his events. Now that he's running for governor of New York and considering the national attack on women's reproductive rights, of which he's a supporter of the Hyde Amendment, which is sickening, and the continued attack of people of color, I just can't sit quiet anymore. Suozzi is not a friend to the people. I went home that night just absolutely stunned and horrified and bewildered by what I had just experienced. The following morning, I called my IVF doctor and I asked to come in just to, make sure that everything was okay because of the immediate cramps I was feeling. I sat on the table and we were chit-chatting as she started the ultrasound. She stopped dead in her tracks and said those words I had never expected to hear in my life that so many women have heard. And those words are, "Aletha, there's no heartbeat." I'll never forget that. I was numb. What? How could this be? My baby had a heartbeat just the day before. The morning of the town hall, I was numb and devastated. And now my baby was dead. Dead. I don't even want to talk about it, but the next few days were a blur. I went and shared the video on social media and Twitter because I wanted people to know what happened. But no one knew the real story. That as a result of this attack, I lost this very, very, very much wanted pregnancy. I didn't want people at the time to know I was doing IVF because I know the comments I would have received about going for a 5th child with a life that was already chaotic and hectic. But this was the real story, and I suffered so much behind the scenes that no one really knew what I was going through, and most people didn't even care to think about or to know about. Some people laughed at me and said I deserved it for opening my mouth and challenging him. A week later, I had to go to the hospital and have a DNC, the same building that I had my heartbreaking termination 6 years prior, when I was 17 weeks pregnant and my baby had trisomy 9 and I had to terminate the pregnancy. Being back there again, having the same procedure was so triggering and sent me into an emotional spiral. And then COVID happened, and I wasn't able to do my IVF cycles till the fall of 2020. Now, 9 months later. Now, another year gone, my body older, my eggs a year older, I did another IVF transfer in September 2020 and miscarried right away. Since September 2020, I've had to do 6 more IVF stimulation cycles, which resulted in not very good outcomes and 2 more miscarriages. During my November 2020 IVF retrieval, I had that very horrible, scary encounter that many of you probably remember with Roy Silver that absolutely devastated me. Guys, I'm talking, please leave. No. Nope. Sorry. I'm going to say that again. During my November 2020 IVF retrieval cycle, I had that very horrible encounter that many of you probably remember with Roy Silver that absolutely ruined that cycle and sent me into the depths. It was an excruciatingly horrible time in my life, and once again, many people laughed and enjoyed this painful experience that I had endured. Devastating. My pregnancy that ended in 2020 at Suozzi's town hall was the furthest along I had been and the youngest that I was. Now the future looks bleak pregnancy-wise. Of course I will be okay. I have 4 amazing children and I'm more than blessed. On the outside, my life looks perfect and my family should be complete. I wouldn't change anything about my termination, and I never, ever regretted it for 1 minute because abortion is healthcare. Skylar was my miracle baby, and he brought me back to life. But ever since my termination, I've had this hole in my heart, and I don't feel complete, and it eats me alive. All this to say, I've had a very, very rough last few years that only a few people have known about, and I'm just able to talk about it now. Why? Well, the last few months have been rough, and as I've been exploring traumas and my PTSD in therapy, and as I reflect on where my life was then and where my life is now, which has resulted in discovering my ADHD diagnosis. Also because of these recent and ongoing despicable attacks on women, women's reproductive rights, abortion rights, terminations for medical reasons, etc., I feel extra triggered. Also, it's been exactly a year this week that I moved from Roslyn, and I finally feel comfortable talking about it, knowing that I'm never, ever going back to this toxic town, Long Island, or anywhere in New York. I know people absolutely love judging me and my life and my activism work. I know people absolutely just get pleasure out of seeing me suffer. I just wanted to give you all a more complete picture of what I've been dealing with behind closed doors and the trauma and PTSD that I'm now unpacking with therapy of what I was enduring behind the scenes those last few years in Roslyn. Infertility and baby loss is one of the hardest things a woman and her partner can go through. When you want a baby so bad and there's nothing you can do to make it happen, it changes the chemicals in your brain. It changes who you are and it alters your being. I've struggled silently and had to endure the ups and downs because I'm a strong woman and committed to my activism work. But it has been so hard and devastating and painful at times, and I've lost a lot of friends. The good thing is that I am persistent, I am determined, and I'm laser focused on my goals, which I've now come to find out in the last month due to my therapy that is likely due to my ADHD, an ability to hyperfocus, and my ability to persevere with relentless passion on anything and everything that comes my way. I am resilient. But yet here I am with my arms still empty, and now I've turned 43 and my pregnancy chances are so slim. I can't believe this is how my story turned out. One late-term abortion and 4 miscarriages. It still boggles my mind. To wrap this up, it pains me to watch Suozzi gallivant around New York campaigning for governor when I know he's the worst candidate in the race and he's a phony. Since 2020, as a woman of color, I've found my voice. My confidence has grown tremendously, and I know how important it is to fight against and dismantle white supremacy and smash the grip of toxic white patriarchy and toxicity. I will not be intimidated and I won't be silent, despite the fact that I've taken a lot of abuse and punches from people, strangers and those I considered friends and people I know in the last few years since I've delved into social justice work in 2017. Nevertheless, she persists because I know I will be on the right side of history when we look back one day. I was verbally berated and then physically assaulted by a man while Congressman Suozzi passively stood by, smirking and then joking about the situation, and then I miscarried the following day. Obviously, Suozzi had no idea that I had miscarried, but regardless, as my congressman, as someone he personally knew, he never called to apologize for what occurred at his town hall or to see if I was okay or after the attack. The temple also did nothing. The same temple my husband received his bar mitzvah at. Silence is violence. And both Suozzi and the temple did nothing to protect a woman or ensure that nothing like this would ever happen again. Suozzi is running for governor of New York. He's such a slimy salesman. I know this because through my campaign volunteering and my times in DC, on Capitol Hill, I got to know him and his character. He's a misogynist. Once on Capitol Hill, when I was questioning about something, he asked me, well, what does your husband think about your behavior? Like, what? What year is this, 1952? My husband is not my keeper. Suozzi is a Republican in Democrat clothes. He is an obstacle to the Democrat Party with his sham problem solvers caucus that continues to prevent progress and passage of Democrat policies that will benefit the people. And I am so glad that he is not rerunning for his congressional seat in New York 3. And I pray and I hope that people will do their due diligence and to learn more about Melanie Dorigo, who is running for Congress in the district, and if elected, she will be the first congresswoman ever to represent the district. But I want New Yorkers to also be aware of Suozzi. He's a narcissist, and he doesn't care about helping others. He cares about money and power, and he has no place in office anymore, nationally or in Albany. It's long past due that we elect real people who really care about helping real people. We need to elect better Democrats. We've seen time and time again that political experience doesn't always translate to actual systemic change and politicians who care. I implore people to stop electing do-nothing Democrats that obstruct progress at worst, and at worst cause tangible harm, and to really research your candidates and what their experience is on the ground fighting for real structural change for the people. If you got this far, thank you so much for reading. I feel it's been very cathartic to let this off. It's been a dark cloud over my head for 2 years, and I am very grateful that I'm finally able to tell my truth and to speak confidently after holding this poison in for 2 years. So thank you so much.